clock says 7 o'clock, so I think we'll get started here. I'm Sandy Duchesne. I'm from the Penobscot Valley chapter, but tonight I've been delegated over to Downeast Audubon as kind of the tech geek here to run the Zoom program. And it's for Bob's program on his 10 years as the Bangor Daily News bird guy. Bob Duchesne just raised his hand.
Oops. I have a question about that.
Sue Shaw, who arranged this program for Downeast Audubon, wanted me to mention a couple of things before we get started. First of all, if anyone was excited about the Scudic trip tomorrow morning, it is canceled due to the incoming blizzard that we're all scheduled to get. Secondly of all, Downeast Audubon Camp Scholarship applications are available by going to page 3 in the winter newsletter. And it's online at downeastaudubon.org if you don't have a paper copy. Deadline for applications is February 20th. So if you know a deserving student, go ahead and throw it in. A couple of housekeeping things. Down at the bottom of your screen, if you kind of hover with your cursor at the bottom of the screen, you'll see chat in the middle and you'll see Q&A 2 squares over. If you could please use the chat for just making comments or talking with each other. We're not necessarily going to be tracking everything going on in the chat when the program starts. But if you have a question that you want to ask Bob, put that into the Q&A. And we'll save those up for the end and get through, well, if people are willing to stay on, we'll go through all of the questions at the end. If there's anything immediate, then I can break in and ask Bob right away. But otherwise, we'll save questions for the end. So hopefully that's clear. And I'll go right ahead now and introduce my husband, Bob Duchesne, who's the BDN bird guy.
Very good. And I'll go, I'll share screen in just a moment, but while we're both on, I just say hi to everybody. This is kind of exciting for a number of reasons. First of all, there's going to be some video in this, and we hope it works. The last time we did this presentation, it did. And we've been working out the kinks to make sure it goes well again tonight. But if your connection is a little slow, some of it may seem a little jerky or snafu'd, and if that happens, well, we apologize. But in the meantime, I've got a lot of ground to cover because this has been an evolution. I can't believe 10 years have passed. I will go ahead and share a screen just so it's a more interesting. There we go. Optimize, share. There. Here's everyone can see that, I presume. And I'll start right there. I got interested in birds in the first grade, and I still remember this clearly, and even my mother remembers it. I was first grade, just barely able to look over the window sill, and the goldfinches would come out of the grass after the rain, and they were so yellow and the grass was so wet green that I was just hooked from first grade. A little bit later on, about 4th grade, I guess, the children's library in my town had a big stuffed bird display. It was still one of the best displays I think I've ever seen. And every time I go to the library, which was like constantly, I would walk down that hall saying, I want to see every one of these birds, even the extinct ones. So I got hooked early, even though I never really tracked that as any kind of career going forward. I was a government major in college, got a business and master's in business degree. So I was never a naturalist. I'm sort of an unnaturalist. I'm just sort of an idiot savant when it comes to birds. Some years ago, well, 10 years ago to be exact, John Holyoke sent me a Facebook friend request. He was the outdoor writer for the Bangor Daily News at the time. And I said yes. I'd known John before. We had done some things together. And right after I said yes to his friend request, he comes right back and says, how would you like to write a column on birding for the Bangor Daily News? So I didn't have to think about it long. It sounded like fun, and I thought it would be fun to share a lot of my experiences and coach people towards improving their own skills. So I said yes. About 3 years ago, Pete Warner, who's now the outdoor editor, sent me an email saying, we're beefing up our website with more videos. How would you like to do some? And I thought that sounded like kind of a fun idea. Even though I had really no ability, as you'll see later, to really do a good video, but it was a good learning curve, and I started doing videos for the Bangor Daily News. There we go. So there's my goldfinch. Now, when I started this, I was already leading my own bird guiding company. I had started that when I retired from a radio career back in the early 2000s. And I started my own bird guiding company. So I knew pretty much what people wanted to see in the field and what experiences they wanted. But I really didn't know what people wanted to read in the newspaper. I figured they were probably different because the average person who enjoys birds might like it in the neighborhood, what comes to the bird feeder, but weren't necessarily going to put life and limb at risk to go way out in the woods or out on boats to see exotic birds. So I knew that I wanted to keep it somewhat relatable, but I didn't exactly know where I was going to go with this. I said, yes, I would do the column without any real clue about what I was going to do. So I knew the interest may be casual for a lot of people who are going to be reading the column. So I had a bunch of principles. I started with basically 3 concepts right away. First of all, I only have 750 words, so you better get to the point fast. Tell a story. Don't be boring. In fact, don't be boring is pretty much my credo every time I sit down to write a column. The first column was November 26th, 2011. And I was in the Maine legislature at the time. There had been a change in administration. It was a rather environmentally unfriendly administration. And there was a major attack on the Natural Resources Protection Act, which is the foundation of all wildlife habitat protection in Maine and a lot of other natural resources. And there was a pretty big attack on it. And I wrote about that in my first column. And that's probably the last political thing I've written about, except maybe climate change related since then. The second column was on owls because owls are dead sexy, and every column I ever write about owls is really popular. Third column was about finches because now we're into December and the finches are coming down from Canada. And the following week, on the fourth column, it was fruit eaters, Bohemian waxwings and pine grosbeaks, again, down from Canada. And about that time, a month into writing this column, I kind of figured it out. Hey, this is all about seasonal changes in what's happening in Maine. And it's what I'm going to be writing about mostly is what's happening right now. So that sort of helped me develop what the columns are going to look like over time. The winter columns are always interesting because, again, we are the South for a lot of those northern birds who fly south for the winter. We have a lot of Canadian invaders, and Sandy and I have been doing some bird surveys way up in the North Maine woods, and we are really being invaded this winter. And so it's been exciting. A lot of those Canadian birds have come down here. And that's always become a recurring theme in winter is what is invading us from the north. So I'll give you a real flavor of what that's like. Welcome to the North Maine woods. It's a warm day in late February, and I'll bet the birds are active. Something magical happens in the North Maine woods most winters. You get a nice warm day anytime during the second half of winter, and the finches go nuts. Crossbills, both white wing and red. Pine siskins all over the place. Purple finches. And that's on top of all the birds that are normally here, like Canada jays, and boreal chickadees, and blackback woodpeckers. One thing all the finches do is come out first thing in the morning and pick a lot of grit and even some road salt out of the road in the morning. If you're driving up here first thing in the morning, let's say 7, 8 in the morning, you'll find a lot of finches out in the road, crossbills in particular. Pine siskins are just everywhere. I know this seems weird, but the roads are actually better in winter than they are in the summer. They're plowed for the logging trucks. All the potholes are filled in by snow and ice. It's actually, if you get here before mud season, you can have a pretty easy time of it.
Same rule as always up here. Trucks have the right of way in both directions all the time. Of course, when you're out here listening to all these finches sing, you might find something unusual, like the rarest woodpecker in Maine. This is an American three-toed woodpecker. Of all the woodpeckers that breed in Maine, this one is the rarest. You're only going to find it in black spruce forests in the Maine North Woods. There's a symphony going on out here in the North Maine woods.
Well, I can die now because that I will never get a better video of American three-toed woodpecker than that. It was over the edge of a snowbank. I heard it tapping and said, "Oh my God, that sounds like one of the rare ones." And I was able to just walk right up on it and get that great video. Speaking of walking right up and getting a great video, this is only about 2 miles away from where that woodpecker was. And Sandy wanted Canada lynx for her birthday. She'd never seen one before. I'd seen 2 in the past, and she was envious and deserved it for her birthday. So while I was doing some bird surveys up there, I was scouting for where there were a lot of lynx tracks. And son of a gun, this area had a lot of lynx tracks. And one morning we drove by, and there it was up in the side road in a tree. I just wanted to share this one. And if anyone has their video up really loud, you can hear Canada Jays calling in the background. But the funny thing is, people really don't go up in the North Woods and bird very much. It's kind of a mystery to a lot of people. And some of the adventure up there is just fantastic. Look at those ear tufts. So that was Andy's birthday present last year. In reality, the most popular columns probably are the ones right from the backyard birds. And because most people who are interested in going distances to see birds also are interested in what in their own backyard. So they're universally popular. So every time I write about the backyard, I always try to go write a column on backyard birds or neighborhood birds every second, third, fourth column, just to make sure I'm getting a lot of those in. That really improved with the epidemic. COVID forced a lot of us into our backyards a lot more, and it sort of doubled down on how much free time I was spending at home. And so I was watching my own birds even more, and that led to this.
This may be hard to believe, but the wildlife in your backyard is used to you. Oh, the things I do for science. This is my backyard. This summer I've been stuck at home a lot getting to know my neighbors, mostly furry and feathered. The other day I was moving my kayak when a hairy woodpecker landed on the suet feeder, just 8 feet away. He didn't even seem to care at all that I was right there. So I said to myself, okay, apparently we know each other. How close can I get before he does care? The answer was 4 feet. So what about all these other birds? Well, for chickadees, they were okay at about 6 feet. 3 feet, not so much. Nuthatches, same thing. So it's time for science. I put up a table and chair right next to the primary bird feeder and sat just 2 feet away. Nothing. I moved back to 3 feet and the chickadees and nuthatches started coming in. The hairy and downy woodpeckers came in, chowing on the suet just 3 feet over my head, close enough to touch. Well, after an hour of this, they don't seem to care at all. So I'm going to move up a foot. The mourning doves don't trust me. You know, for the first hour, they wouldn't even come in the yard. Now they're starting to move up. Finally, I moved up again. Now my face is just a foot from the feeder, and I'm reaching out, touching it. Everyone's decided I'm not a threat. The birds are just walking around my fingers. At this point to them, I'm just scenery. If you ever wonder what they think about you, now you know.
So I've been spending a lot more time appreciating the birds in my own backyard and really getting to know them and watching their habits and how they react. And I'll show you some more examples later. And one reason I'm showing videos is because I really believe in show and tell. I could just tell you stories here, or I could actually show you some of the adventures I write about and some of the roots behind what you read in the column on a weekly basis. For instance, this is right across the lake from my house.
This is the inlet stream for Pushaw Lake. Boy, there's a lot going on. Next time you go paddle a marsh, bring your binoculars. There's a lot of hidden birds out here. Eastern kingbird on a nest. There's 2 Virginia rails sneaking up. Wow, least bittern. That's on the state endangered species list.
This video still makes me laugh a little bit because, first of all, I kind of learned from this that birds are, especially in a marsh, are careful about what's walking up to them from the land. Their bigger predators would be things like raccoons and skunks. If you come in from the water, they don't exactly know what to make of you because they don't have many predators that come in that way. So you may notice I get relatively close to swamp sparrows and marsh wrens. And so I learned a little bit from this. Also, I have to laugh at myself because I'm listening to all the birds and identifying by ear. There's willow flycatcher calling back there, and a bunch of other yellow warblers and other things. It was kind of funny. So that's what's really right around us, and I'll get back to some of that later. But again, you've seen the North Woods in the summer, in the winter. The summer can be just outstanding as well. And one of the things that makes Maine special is we're really in a transition area going from the southern Appalachian hardwood forest up to the Canadian boreal, spruce fir forest. And we've got a lot of pockets where you can get both types of birds in relatively close proximity. So our North Woods really have just a tremendous concentration. And besides, we're the most forested state in the nation, so there's just a lot of ways to make babies up there. And it's a good place to be socially distanced because when I bird up there, I don't run anybody. Sandy and I have been doing Maine breeding bird atlas surveys up there, so we get into the woods quite a bit. And there's just a lot of diverse habitats. And this last summer, I came across one of the best roads I think I've ever visited in the North Woods. It was just incredible.
There is nothing like birding the North Maine woods. "5 a.m. Just listen to all those Swainson's thrushes. I'm at 2,500 feet on the backside of number 4 mountain next to Moosehead Lake. It's all fairly short, dense balsam fir, sawed off, broken off birch. This is what blackpolls and Swainson's thrushes and magnolia warblers and redstarts and juncos love. And there are tons of them. I do love birding the North Maine woods. Out here alone, just me, the moose, and the bears. The moose really are pretty docile, and the bears really aren't that big. Well, maybe a little. It's only a bunny. Nobody's going to believe this. I've had 28 Swainson's thrushes, 19 blackpolls, about 16 magnolia warblers. I've had boreal chickadee babies, 5 fox sparrows. This road was amazing. Some places just make you go, wow. Yeah, birds in the North Maine woods are great. And the nights aren't bad either. Far from the city lights, it's pretty spectacular.
So that was just an incredible place. I really like that particular road. Spruce grouse, it's my favorite bird. Took me a while to figure that out, but these guys all have very distinct personalities, as you'll see in a moment. And because they can be rather distinct, I actually name them. When I get to know a spruce grouse, I actually give them a name. And that's fun, but also I anthropomorphize a lot in my column. I will ascribe human characteristics to wildlife. And I do that intentionally. I'm really not pointing out that, that these things are human. What I'm really saying is humans have a lot more in common with animals than we think. All of us have the basics of eat, don't be eaten, and make babies. And that's what birds do. And birds have their own social and societal behaviors. We're not really all that different from the wildlife we're watching. And so sometimes I will anthropomorphize a little bit. And spruce grouse, oh my God.
This is Bruce the spruce grouse. He's the first grouse I ever named. Let me back up. Spruce grouse are funny. The males tend to come back to the same spot every spring for breeding purposes, and if you know where that is, you can go visit them every year, and you get to know individual grouse personally. If I get to know a grouse personally, I give him a name. I've got 15 to 20 spruce grouse all over Maine named. This is Deuce. His territory is right next to Bruce's. They spend much of the spring watching each other suspiciously, making sure the other doesn't encroach in their territory. There's an invisible line in the woods, and I've never seen either one cross it. Also, each bird has a distinct personality. Bruce is quiet. He'll just sit there and watch you, or walk away slowly. Deuce is bold. He'll follow you around and demand you stop interfering with his love life. He can be a real clown. He can also be really sneaky if there's no hen around. He'll just hide there and wait for you to walk on. I've doubled back a couple of times, and he was following me out. These guys are in Lubec, way down east in Maine. This is Skitter. What a clown he is. If a grouse walks up to you and fans his tail and flaps his wings, he's telling you to go away. This is his spot for courting the ladies, and you are intruding. I keep a respectful distance, but sometimes he'll just walk up to me and give me the evil eye, so I have to leave. Kidder is about 300 yards down the road from Skitter, and he has a real attitude. He keeps a bigger territory than most. The ladies love him. All these guys are up in the North Maine woods. How tame is a spruce grouse? This is Rocky. Right now, on the day we met, there are 15 people standing just 20 feet away from him. We're all watching each other, and he's not even very much annoyed. This one's in Roque Bluffs, Downeast, Maine. This is Woody. He's about an hour south of Rocky and definitely more shy. He tends to perch higher in the tree out of reach. Some grouse you could almost touch, but not this one. There are 5 spruce grouse lined up along a trail in a national wildlife refuge about 15 minutes away from Woody. Their names are Blue, Cross, Huey, Dewey, and Louie. Talk about personalities. Blue does not care. I walked right up to him and said hi. Cross was a whisper away and was insulted by my visit. I don't think Huey was on territory. He was just behind some branches as I walked by. Dewey didn't care. He just sat on a branch and waited for me to walk. When I didn't, he went down to the ground and started feeding again. And Louie is the boldest grouse I have ever met. Hey Louie, Bob's here. That's a good boy. All right, he's telling me to leave, and since I don't want him to get too accustomed to people, I'm afraid we're going to have to say goodbye to Louie. If you liked Louie, give him a like. Scooter lives not far away from these other guys. I've only met him twice. He just didn't seem to care that I was around, even when there were 2 females nearby wanting his attention. I don't know what to make of him. Same way with Kiwi up in the North Maine woods in the Katahdin Woods and Waters National Wildlife Refuge. He was out in the road when I met him and just kept feeding. Spruce grouse are not that common, but they're all over down east in northern Maine. They like spruce fir forests because they eat those spruce needles in the winter. In the summer, a little more berries, bugs, whatever they can get. But the winter, it's spruce needles. So on the whole, spruce grouse may be the funniest bird in America. Spruce grouse. Sorry I can't stay long, but when they tell me to go, I gotta respect their wishes. See you next spring, guys.
So you get some idea why that's my favorite bird. Now, you can't go wrong with Atlantic puffins either. This is a charismatic bird that very few Mainers have actually seen because they're all out on 5 islands off the coast of Maine. And some of them are rather easy to get to, and some are a little harder, but here's
Hi, I'm Bob Duchesne, and today we're taking a bird's eye view of the sexiest bird in Maine. This is the Atlantic puffin. Only one state in America has them, and that's Maine. The best place to see them is on Bachaya Seal Island off the Downeast coast. And to get there, you have to meet Andy Patterson.
Our destination this morning is a small rocky island about 9.5 nautical miles due south. We're taking this group, Corey and I, 10 miles out to sea, that way.
In order to survive, puffins need an air force, and that's these guys. Common and Arctic terns also breed on Puffin Islands. They're fast, nimble, and will gang up on threats, including people. While protecting their own chicks, they accidentally protect the puffins. There's a couple thousand terns out here, and they're making more. Puffins also have cousins on the island, members of the same family called alcids. Common murres are out here. Razorbills are out here too. And the star of the show. There are thousands of puffins on Machias Seal Island, one of 5 puffin colonies along the Maine coast, and the only one you can land on.
So the Gulf of Maine turns out to be one of Maine's biggest assets when it comes to birding. I talked about the fact we're the most forested state in the nation, and that helps. We're a northern state right along the Canadian borders, but we share some birds with other northern states. What we have that they don't is the Gulf of Maine. And besides all the puffins, there are other nesting islands out there. There's pelagic species, ocean-going species that nest in the South Atlantic and then come up here in the summer and invade the Gulf of Maine, eating the same thing the whales are feeding on. Then we have huge migrations of shorebirds taking advantage of our big tides and our huge mudflats. And so there are epic migrations that go right by Maine, and that makes Maine really special.
6 a.m. It's bitterly cold, the wind is from the north, and I'm watching for sea ducks. Why? For science. Yeah, that's it. Scudic Point, Acadia National Park. This is Sea Watch 2019. From this spot, at the right corner of the Scudic Point parking lot, biologists from the Scudic Institute count the migrating seabirds going by. Most of these birds nested in Maine or Canada, and they're heading south for the winter. It's nearly impossible to count them where they nest and learn how populations are doing, but you can get them when they're going by at this spot. Northern gannets are the largest birds out here. They nest in huge colonies up in Newfoundland and Cape St. Mary, and in Quebec on the Gaspé Peninsula. They're on Bonaventure Island. You'll see a lot of different color variations as you go by, and that's just a sign of age. The adults are full white with black wingtips. And then the more brown on top, the younger the bird is. One that was hatched this year will be almost all brown. And sometimes you get this. A school of fish will come in, and the harbor porpoises notice. And as soon as they start schooling around, the gulls come in, and then the gannets come in, and then you see this enormous plunge diving going from these gannets from 40 feet up. It's a feeding frenzy. Scoters are diving ducks. We have 3 species that pass through Maine, and some summer over. Seeing mostly surf scoters go by today. Had a white-winged scoter go by a moment ago. And I haven't seen any black scoters yet, but they're all here. And they migrate all the way down to the southeastern United States. A lot of them stay right here in the winter, but a lot of these that we're seeing right now are going by all the way south. Another bird we count are common eiders. At one time they were almost hunted to extinction in Maine, and they're declining again now. They're moving around at the moment. Some of the Canadian eiders coming down here, some of the Maine eiders heading south. Now, admittedly, some of these birds are really way far off. And some of them are right close. Sea Watch at Scudic Point. It happens every day from dawn until 11 a.m. from now through November. If you're interested, all you have to do is bring a good pair of binoculars and show up.
So we are blessed in Maine to have assets like that right in our own backyard. One thing I'm really very careful about doing or not doing with a column is getting too technical. As I say, I wasn't a biologist anyway. I know all the terms for the bird pieces, but I try not to use them. Supercilium is the mustache on a bird. And rather than say supercilium, I'll say mustache. The yellow in front of this bird's eye, the white-throated sparrow, that's called the lores. You're never going to see me say lores in the Bangor Daily News because I don't need to use technical terms. This is just about all of us enjoying our experiences with the birds and getting to know them better. It doesn't have to be technical, and I don't get technical. Mostly it's observations about our own world. And more importantly, at least for me, is when I have to do a weekly column, I've become very aware of the calendar. So I used to notice migration changes, but now I know almost to the day when I'm expecting certain things to happen. And I've watched as southern birds have moved north into Maine, and northern birds are moving away. Boreal chickadee, which you've met a couple of times already, used to be findable along the coast down at least as far as Final Haven. Now I have trouble finding them as far up as Lubec. And I'm starting to find them getting thin up in the Maine North Woods. So climate change is having an impact. There are other birds I expect to be Maine residents within the next 20 years who aren't now. I expect black vulture to move in. Mississippi kite, I suspect, is already nesting in New Hampshire. I expect it to get here sooner or later. Already we've seen the cardinals and the tufted titmice and the Carolina wrens and red-bellied woodpeckers move up. So everybody can watch this change happen. Because I do the column, I get even more sensitive to it. Photography started right away. When they asked me to write the column, no mention of photography was ever said, but it became pretty clear pretty quick that they didn't have any photos, and the photos always help make the column more attractive. So I just started taking photos right away, and sometimes they will actually inspire columns. This is an American redstart that posed beautifully for our group as Sandy led a walk on the University of Maine campus last summer. And I took the photo and said, well, that's got to be a column now. And so that was the next week's column. I wasn't really a photographer when I started out. Now I'm much more interested because I'm trying to get better photos to go along with the Bangor Daily News. I'm not out to win any awards. They just make the column more interesting. And I've really dressed up the column with a lot of fascinating ones over the years. And I'll just run through a few. American woodcock, Arctic terns, black guillemot. I like to get the birds singing whenever I can. It's become a challenge. So black and white warbler, black-throated blue warbler, Bohemian waxwing right here, eating fruit over at the University of Maine, cedar waxwing eating apple blossoms at Schoodic Point in Acadia, brown thrasher singing, chestnut-sided warbler singing, common eiders pooling around, common redpoll. They have invaded from Canada again this year, but they haven't come very far south. We're getting them in the North Woods all over the place, but not much around here. Common goldeneye with babies. She had about 7 babies. Gray catbird, great shearwaters, which come up from the deep South Atlantic, about one of the most remote places on Earth. They come up here in the summer. And this is cool. You got that South Atlantic bird with the most northern nesting of the same family, the northern fulmar, both together. I will never get this shot again. Harlequin ducks have started to move in even more numbers along the coast. My favorite duck, hooded merganser. Indigo buntings are kind of cute. Least bittern, that's an endangered species in Maine, but they nest right across the lake from me. Long-tailed ducks are just wicked cute. Magnolia warbler singing. Northern mockingbird. Palm warbler singing. Get these all over the Orono Bog Boardwalk. Pine grosbeak eating fruit. This is the nest of common ravens over there at Boothead Trail Preserve in Lubec. Red-breasted merganser, ruby-throated hummingbird taken to my neighbor's garden. Rusty blackbird. I take my camera everywhere I go with me right now just because this may happen. I had the rusty blackbird just picking at the leaves in migration right in a mud puddle near my house and snapped the photo. Scarlet tanagers are cool. Swainson's thrush. Upland sandpiper all over Maine's bigger blueberry barrens. Virginia rail. Sora. Wimbrels, nice big shorebird. White crowned sparrow, Closest they nest, I think, is in the upper end of Newfoundland, and certainly maybe the Gaspé Peninsula, but they come through here in big numbers in the fall. Wilson snipe will sit on the top of trees and telephone poles. Yellow warbler and yellow-bellied sapsucker. We'll get back to the backyard again. One thing that's become really clear to me is birds really become used to you pretty quick. And you're just a two-legged caribou to them, or patio furniture once they get to know you. If you don't look like a threat, if you just wander around not staring them at the backyard, they get kind of used to you. And the funny thing is, the more I write about backyards, birds and birding columns, the more likely that Google is going to pick up the column from the Bangor Daily News and put it in its news feed nationally. I wrote a bird feeding column a year or so ago, and all of a sudden I was getting emails from all over the country asking me questions. I said, where's this coming from? Because I didn't know Google had done that. There's one guy in Toronto, when I explained to him that all his finches had come down to us for the winter, was suddenly my friend, and I would hear every 3 weeks or so from him telling me what was going on in his backyard. So that was a real shock to me. But now that I have to spend more time with my own birds in my backyard, I've started to notice even more patterns. And I'd invite you to do that too, because these guys have a system.
I like to think this is my backyard, but it's really the living room and kitchen for all the critters that live here. For months of self-isolation, I've been watching the birds coming and going from my backyard. You know, I think the little twerps have a system. Maybe this is nuts and because I'm stir crazy, but today I'm going to spy on them for a couple of hours and see exactly what it is they're doing. For instance, there seems to be a rhythm to how they come and go. The downy woodpeckers don't like to seem to be alone. The bigger birds, blue jays, hairy woodpeckers, mourning doves, they don't seem to care so much. The chickadees and the nuthatches come in waves, and when they come, they seem to be vigilant enough to make the other birds and the critters a little more comfortable about the safety in the area. Start the clock. It's 9:30. There's nothing in the yard, no squirrels, no birds, just one sleeping porcupine. So we wait. And we wait. And we wait. Hold on. Hairy woodpecker and a white-breasted nuthatch both called simultaneously. And here they come. 9:55, and suddenly there's 2 hairy woodpeckers and 1 downy woodpecker at the feeder. The hairies are bigger, so they can bully their way around the feeder. The downy just sort of sits and waits until they've had a mouthful and fly off. 4 minutes. They're here 4 minutes. And then all of a sudden, all the birds are gone again. 10:30. Not a single bird, not even a squirrel. You know, for an hour, I haven't seen a single squirrel, and this yard is usually full of them. I wonder if the squirrels are coming in with the birds. Maybe they're using them as warning sentinels. Hold on. It's 10:46. Suddenly the backyard is full of birds. There's 3 white-breasted nuthatches, 2 red-breasted nuthatches, 1 downy woodpecker, 2 hairy woodpeckers, 3 gray squirrels, 1 red squirrel, all at once. 10:59. Just 7 minutes, and all of a sudden they're all gone, not even a squirrel. 11:30. It's quiet. I mean, really quiet. 11:37, here we go again. 2 downy woodpeckers, 2 hairy woodpeckers, 3 white-breasted nuthatches, 2 red-breasted nuthatches, 3 chickadees. And look at that, a brown creeper. It's a whole flock of different birds all came in at once. 7 minutes. And all of a sudden, they're all gone again. Well, there's something going on here. It's now noon, 2.5 hours later. Birds come in waves. The chickadees and nuthatches seem to lead the way. At least they're noisy. And that convinces the other birds that there's somebody watching over them. A common raven just croaked. It's telling me whether to do this again, and he says, nevermore.
So I invite you to look at what's going on in your own backyard too. I think for most of my life, I've said, oh, cool, birds at the feeder, never recognizing the patterns that were happening out there. It really does get pretty distinctive about when they're here, when they're not. Videos. As I say, Pete Warner about 3 years ago said, would you do some videos? And I did, and it was fun. Very steep learning curve. I look at some of the early stuff I did and I just throw up. There's a real steep learning curve to it. My most popular video ever was a trip by boat into the Old Sow Whirlpool next to Eastport. It's had over 8,000 views, I think, on YouTube. And they have Google Analytics to tell you how people are treating your videos. Are they watching through the whole thing? Are they skipping through? I noticed on that one that most people were skipping the first minute and a half of the video until I got deep into the whirlpool. And then you'd see a big bump in viewership again. And I realized more from that video than anything else that YouTube is short attention span theater. You've got to get attention right away. You got to get right to your point. You got to keep it moving. You can't do long-winded intros like I used to do. So you're probably the last people who are ever going to see that. I just don't do those anymore. I don't even do the shorter ones that I was experimenting with. Now, the whole point of doing videos, there's several points. First, they can be entertaining. Second of all, they can be informative. I do these now as much to get people to experience Maine birding as possible because we have a whole lot to offer. Back to the backyard again. This is sort of in our backyard. It's over at the University of Maine campus in the cornfields.
There's a lot of secret birds in a marsh, but they're hard to find because it's a marsh. It's hard to walk through, unless there's a road right through it. This is the University of Maine campus in Orono. There used to be cornfields here. In fact, it's still called the cornfields. The corn is gone, but the marsh is still here. There's a lot of activity around the edges of the field. You've got red-winged blackbirds, you've got bobolinks out in the grassland, savanna sparrows are with them. The real reason to come here is because this may now be the best railed spot in the whole Bangor area. Rails are skinny chicken-like birds that are skinny because they can go between the reeds in a marsh and not make much wiggle, so they don't attract that much attention. The two rails that are common in Maine, if you know where to look, are the Virginia rail and the Sora. The Sora is named Sora because it makes a call that sounds like Sora, Sora, and then a whinny and a bunch of other things. The Sora is a small bird, maybe about the size of, what, a starling, with a yellow bill. The Virginia rail is just a little bit bigger, not quite pigeon-sized, but it's got more of an orange bill. Both of them skulk around together in these marshes. They're particularly noisy after dark. They can go all night long with their squawking and squealing. But maybe the best time to see them is to be here first thing in the morning as daylight is coming, because they just walk around in the mudflats, and they'll even walk up in the path, and you can see them. Mother Nature's got a lot of secrets, but she's just not that good at keeping them if you know where to look. The cornfields, University of Maine campus in Orono.
Okay, this is one you don't want in your backyard. One thing I've certainly learned is this is my fourth most popular YouTube video, and this is a northern goshawk. And one thing I've learned is if you're willing to risk life and limb, you can come up with something that's interesting to other people. So long as you're in danger of hurting yourself, people will watch it.
Northern goshawk. It's the one bird you don't want to meet this spring. I've only got a moment before that goshawk chases me out of here. He's not going to let me linger. Northern goshawk is an accipiter. That's a family of hawks that also has sharp-chinned hawk and Cooper's hawk in it that has relatively short wings and long tail. That makes them fast but maneuverable. So they're very good at flashing through the woods. And nobody is better than that than a goshawk. They can fly through the woods without hitting anything. Except you. They will hit you. And it will draw blood. Like a lot of northern birds, they actually spread through North America, across the Arctic over to Europe and Asia. So there are northern goshawks over there too. Ours don't get much south of Canada. They come into Maine, they come down the Appalachians and the Rockies along the ridge lines. That's about it. It's a northern bird. Northern goshawks are very secretive. You don't usually see them except when they're around the nest, because boy do they raise the alarm. And that's the point. If you get near their nest, there is no bird in North America more ferocious at protecting its nest than that one. So I was able to get close enough to the nest before the goshawk saw me to know there was at least one youngster in there. It was all white, stood about that high. Couldn't see if there were others because it was about time to run for my life.
In her defense, she's not the meanest one I've ever met. I've had others that have made me run faster than she did. I'm on a mission. In fact, I'm on several missions, and I'll reveal those missions right now. One of the reasons I like writing the column is I'd like to make bird identification easier for people. And so I'll try to work in some teaching elements just to demystify how you identify birds. And some of them can be pretty hard because they're in different plumages. Genders are often dissimilar. Immatures are just plain weird. And also the birds really don't want you to see them. So identification can be hard, but it doesn't have to be. So I'll take something really difficult to identify and try to simplify it for you.
Let's go play in the mud. This is Lubec, one of the best shorebird watching spots in the entire state. The tides can run up to 21 feet. When that tide drops, mud as far as the eye can see. Maine is kind of special because we have these tides and we have these mud flats, and the shorebirds stop here in order to feed and refuel for their long trek south. Problem is there's about 34 shorebird species in the state. How can you possibly learn to identify them all? Well, let's make this easy. There may be 34 shorebird species, but they're not all at the shore. Some are on sand beaches, some are on blueberry barrens, some are on rocks. So at the end of the day, there's maybe, I don't know, 15, 16 shorebird species that could be at the shore. Only a small handful of those are tough. Some of them are pretty darn easy. So let's just deal with those tough ones. Let's start with the peeps, those 5 small sandpipers that can be a little bit difficult to sort out. Let's start with the smallest one, the least sandpiper, the least big sandpiper in the entire world. It's smaller than the rest, it's browner than the rest, and it has yellowish legs. Don't let that yellow leg thing fool you, because the guidebooks make a big deal out of it, but sometimes if the legs are muddy, they're in shadow, they're backlit, they can look dark and you can be fooled. So go with that brown bird thing. Because the next one up is the semi-palmated sandpiper, and that's a grayer brown, and it has dark legs. It's maybe a 1/4 inch bigger than the least sandpiper, so they're very, very similar in size, and they can be standing right next to each other. So brown, slightly grayer, darker legs. 90% of the sandpipers on the beach are going to be just those 2 species. Now, there's a third small peep, and this is the tough one, a western sandpiper. They actually are western. They bypass Maine and go to Florida where they spend their winter. So where we have semi-palmated sandpipers all over our beaches here, in Florida, you would see the same phenomenon, but all of them are western sandpipers. A few get into Maine every year, and here's what you're looking for. It's about the same size as a semi-palmated sandpiper, maybe just a touch bigger. It has a thin, droopy at the point bill. It's going to be hard to tell apart, but it's got a little rust in the back shoulders, little rustiness. Look for that. If you've got a sandpiper you're a little suspicious about, look for that field mark. Now there are 2 of these peeps that are longer winged, and you can notice that. And they're a little bit bigger. So you've got the white rump sandpiper. Some of the birds out here are white rumped, but they're hard to pick out. Here's what you look for. They are bigger, and they are longer winged. So the first step is to just scan the flock. You're going to see hundreds of semi-palmated sandpipers. Scan the flock until you see one a little bigger, and be suspicious about that one. Take a closer look. Now it's got longer wings, so the wings are longer than the tail. They will stick out past the end. And here, I want you to see this. White rump sandpipers are longer legged, but the bill is about the same size. So they have to stoop over more to pick up their food, right? And that longer wing and the tail just sticks higher into the air. It even sort of wiggles a little bit as they're walking around. You don't see that in the semi-palmated sandpipers so much. Okay, now in slow motion. So if you've got one you're suspicious of, look for that. The other thing that's pretty apparent in white rump sandpipers is they have these chevrons underneath the wings, which is kind of distinctive. Oh, one last thing about white rump sandpipers. Because they are longer legged, they can be a little deeper in the water. So I will look for them in the puddles a little deeper. I will look for them in the water's edge a little deeper than the rest. As I'm scanning the flock for the slightly bigger birds, I will key in on those that are there. Now then, Baird sandpiper. That's a tough little peep. It is like a white rump sandpiper, longer winged, so the wings will stick out past the tail, sometimes even crossing a little bit. It's that long. And they're also about the same size, so when I'm scanning the flock, looking for those bigger birds, I might pick up one of those. They're a little browner. They don't quite have the long legs of the white rump sandpiper, so they don't teeter up quite as much. And they tend to be a little browner around the back and shoulders. They also have what look like black dots or black diamonds on the back of the adults, and a really scaly look on the young ones. Trust me, they're not easy and there aren't many of them, but they are here. Okay, 2 last tips. They often fly in flocks, right? Look for the size difference in the birds and pick out the ones that don't look like all the others and follow that to the ground. And maybe that's one of your unusual birds. And one last tip. Know before you go. Every shore in Maine is different as to when the tide starts to open up the shorebird mudflats. Here in Lubec, about 2 hours after high tide, it starts to get good. In fact, I know from years of experience that if I'm down in this spot and watch this first mud open up, this is where the shorebirds are going to come. I just wait there and let them come to me.
So yeah, as much as possible, I will demystify how to identify birds, especially the really tough ones. I'm also doing it by ear because I'm a real ear birder, and it's a lot easier than people think. It's really a challenge for a lot of people to learn how to identify birds by ear, but it doesn't have to be. And so I will write columns, especially in the spring as bird singing season starts, trying to demystify a bird or two along the way. Bird behavior has turned into a real big topic because there's sort of a progression about how people learn how to go identify birds. You start out with color, everybody does, it's a yellow bird, then field marks, then maybe you get the song. Eventually you might start to realize that there are differences in habitat that these birds are using. And lastly, behavior. Nowadays, I will identify birds more by behavior probably than I do the color and field marks and stuff. Much of the time, I will just ask myself, okay, Bob, how did you do it? And that's what I'll write about. So identifying by behavior has become a kind of a mission. And lastly, I always like to explain where to go birding. I developed the Maine birding trail, and this has an Audubon flavor to it. Many years ago, when I first got involved with Maine Audubon, the Penobscot Valley chapter, Sandy and I started guiding trips, just day trips and then overnight trips. And we went to some good places, but after we'd done those places, we'd look around and say, okay, what's next? And I started to wonder, well, what other good places are there in Maine to find really cool birds? And I just started to explore. I eventually developed the Maine birding trail based on all this and wrote a book about it. So I got as much fascinated by where are the birds as I was, what are they? So that's my last mission is I'm on a mission to tell you where to go find birds. As I say, I do videos. I don't do a whole lot of artistic stuff. I don't use a lot of, I like natural sounds. I don't use a lot of music. But every now and then I'll have a little fun with some of my own backyard birds once again and produce something that may be a little more artistic. And here's a couple of examples. To this day, I still don't know what they were doing. It wasn't mating behavior because this was in September when they all come together. And they will do that. They'll all gather together and that helps them catch fish better. They get into those schools and keep them controlled and can feed. So you do see that behavior, but I've not seen that dancing much. And this was right off my dock. And lastly, I gave myself a challenge a couple of autumns ago. We're in Maine. Anybody can photograph or video a loon. Anybody can do it with foliage. But can you do it with a loon against a foliage background? And so I took that challenge one morning and got out as early as I possibly could. The sun was just up, and this was it. So that's it. Didn't even realize that toolbar was visible upstairs. I just up the top of the screen. I can't tell what's visible because all I'm seeing is the video. So anyway, there's been an evolution to this column, which has been a real treat for me. I love writing this column because I learn as much as anybody does. It forces me to learn a little more, and it forces me to observe more. And then I like to share the experience with everybody. So that's been good. And the more I learn, the more I question what I'm seeing, and that leads to even more columns. So I just never run out of topics, especially because when you do a weekly column over a number of years, you can just write the same thing over and over, but use different words. And there's a seasonality to this. I know that in the spring, I'll be talking about singing birds. I know I'll be talking about migration in the fall. I'll do shorebirds. I'll do hawk migration. It's going to come up every year. And then the finches and what's happening in winter. So I really don't have any trouble coming up with topics. And I get a lot of feedback from people. This last fall, somebody said, why am I hearing owls this time of year? Well, that was a column. It was nice that he sent me a note. And besides, when was the last time you get a letter from somebody with a stamp on it? It wasn't an email. It was actually a private letter. So I do get suggestions, and that's where a lot of this comes from. And I appreciate everything that people forward to me. I now get to identify a lot of birds online because people want to know what they are. And I'll tell you, that's a real challenge because sometimes the photos are only this big. So I can stop there and move on. Sandy, should we go to questions?
Sure. Anne, back when you were doing your North Woods video, she wants to know if you can tell us some of the best places to visit for birding in the North Woods, specific roads or preserves or whatever.
Absolutely, yeah. I keep no secrets. If I ever send too many people to one place, I'll just go to other places to find some more. So I've got some favorite places. In the winter, right now, for instance, I love going up the Telos Road to Chamberlain Bridge from the Golden Road, out the Golden Road from Millinocket up the Telos Road to Chamberlain Bridge. That whole area is really finchy. One thing I've noticed is that the finches will gather wherever the trucks are turning because that churns up gravel. And now they get all this grit that they can get in the morning that's not ice covered. Plus, they will, the crossbills in particular, seem to know there's salt under your car. So they will come get a lick. It's pretty funny to watch. So that area where the Greenville Road comes up and intersects with the Golden Road, that happens to be another really finchy spot. But really a lot of those logging roads in winter just have big clouds of birds if you're just paying attention when you see them. I had a flock of 110 common redpolls on the way into Second Roach Pond where Metawisla is located just 2 weeks ago. So they can be really pretty common on any of those logging roads. You don't have to go on back roads. They're right on the big ones where there's plenty of easy driving. And summer, I love going down east. Again, I love getting up in the woods. What I'm looking for when I'm in the North Maine woods is spruce habitat, black spruce in particular, because that's where the concentration of those northern forest species are going to be.
Okay, great. Thank you. David and Donna both asked the same question. What kind of camera gear do you use?
You saw several different cameras in there. Most of the video was taken on just a basic point and shoot Fujifilm Fine Pix camera that's like 10 years old now. It's just a point and shoot. Then about just over a year ago, I came into possession of a Canon 80D, which is a DSLR, which is a little bit tricky to use for video for a number of technical reasons, but I've sort of overcome those and I use that with great frequency now. A lot of the video is not done by the camera. It's done by the post-production, trying to make it all look viewable because most of my footage ends up getting tossed out. It's just awful. And same with the photos. It's a real challenge to shoot things against backlighting, for instance. But Canon 80D, I also have a Sony Handycam that I pull out of the pocket every now and then, but these days it's mostly that Canon 80D.
Okay. David wants to know if you quit feeding in the spring when the bears are active.
I don't, because where I live, the bears don't usually get down this far. We're on a bit of a thumb in Pushaw Lake with an outlet river behind us. So there's not a lot of room to get here. It has happened before. I lost all my feeders one spring. So I do recommend people take them in, but only if you're in a bear-prone area.
Okay, David, another David wants to know if you've seen the Stillery sea eagle.
Yes. In fact, Sandy forced me to, and God bless her for it. I tried twice already. I had a lot of things to do and wasn't really going to sacrifice another day to go to Booth Bay. But Sandy said, no, we'll leave early in the morning, 5 a.m., get down there by 7:30. It seems to hang out near the aquarium in Booth Bay. Let's get there in time. And son of a gun, it got there just as we did. And so we got great looks. One of the better mornings, it flew right in front of us. Could see the yellow bill without binoculars. It was a 747. What a big bird.
Sue wants to know if there's a book in the works of your columns and photos.
Probably not photos. I think about doing the book now and then. I just don't know if anyone reads books anymore. So much of it just seems to be online. In fact, the Maine Birding Trail has a book attached to it that I wrote, came out in 2009, but it's hard to update a book. So I put most of that content free on mainebirdingtrail.com, which I invite anybody to go just use the maps, use the guiding information, and go explore places. So there may be a book. I think it'd be easy enough to do. I just don't know if anybody buy it.
Okay. Allison wants to know about brown creepers. Are the ones I'm seeing at this time of year resident or down from the north? And our breeding creepers went south.
I'm not aware of creepers leaving. I think it's probably resident. I see nuthatches go. Chickadees will go. Blue jays will go. Creepers, you don't see flocks going south very often. And so I don't think they do.
Okay. Harold says, I can't find those three-toed woodpeckers you see in the North Maine woods. What is your secret?
Harold, you camp right there. In that particular spot, we're talking about the road into Nesatahunk Lake Wilderness Campground. It's like that 1 mile before you get to campground is my favorite road in the state. That 1 mile is unbelievable. That's where some of those grouse that you met earlier are located. I have 5 different territories lined up this 1 mile road. And there's been American three-toed woodpecker in there. The last couple of years, they've been harder to get because they've sort of eaten out what was near the road and disturbed by lumbering operations there a few years ago. And I think they moved off the road, so they're a little tougher, but they're still there. And I think they're still in the Harvester Road area, which is just up the road from Nesatahunk Lake off the Telos Road. And they're definitely on the way about 2 miles west of Chamberlain Bridge at a big black spruce area. So that's where I look for them.
And an anonymous viewer asked if any other birds eat apple blossoms.
I think so. I would, yeah, I'm sure they do, but I can't give you it off the top of my head. I'm thinking of the other fruit eaters like pine grosbeaks, but if they're eating the apple blossoms, they're in Canada doing it, so I don't see them do it.
Well, I remember a time when I was leading a walk at the University of Maine, and there was a wave of Tennessee warblers coming through on migration, and they were all over the apple trees in the arboretum at the university. So that's one that I would give, and I would not be surprised if other birds in migration eat them.
Yep.
And I think that's all in the questions. There are some more comments in the chat. Karen says, I still read books. Nothing like holding a real book with paper pages. Deb and Ed said, we recently found your YouTube videos on birding. Very nice. Jake says, I worked up at Telos Road and saw flickers flying on the road every 100 feet for miles.
A lot of flickers up there. One thing I should mention, there is a YouTube channel. I started this last summer. I said, hey, these are more popular than I expected. The Bangor Daily News ones do okay. I started to share them on the Facebook page with Maine Birds, which is a very popular Facebook site for Maine birders to use and post their stuff. And they became popular. So I said, well, may as well do a YouTube channel so they're easily shareable, because that Facebook page doesn't let you share because it's a private group. But so I started doing YouTube channel, and so it's just look up Bob Duchesne on YouTube, and I should pop up to the top of the list.
Any other questions? You can post them in the Q&A now. If not, this was recorded, so if you know anybody who didn't get a chance to see it tonight who will want to, I'm going to be providing the link to Sue Shaw, and I guess Zach is your Facebook guru, and he'll be getting that up onto the Facebook page, the Downeast Audubon Facebook page, in a few days. So otherwise, thank you very much, everybody, for attending. Stay warm and safe. The blizzard coming in, and we'll sign off.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.